Hi, groupers. Pastor Marshall. I hope that you are ready to dig in to this last section of Acts chapter 2, the beginning of the church. What an exciting chapter it has been. I started my message this last weekend sharing some different types of Christian worship services that I have seen, that I have attended. And I hope that I did so respectfully because that's very much what my intent was. Well, I'd like you to do the same. I'd like you in your group just to take a few minutes and share some different traditions, especially if you grew up in a tradition that is fairly different than our church. Share what it was like. And let's be careful to be respectful because that is my intent, is that we're not telling stories, but we're sharing just differences. Well, after you've done that, broken the ice, hopefully everybody's gotten to talking a little bit, I'd like us to look first at verse 43. It says that they were devoted. I want you to look at that word devoted. It means that they were continually doing these four things. These four activities were always a part of their gatherings. So what do you think of the idea that we today should always have these four activities in our worship services? It says the apostles' teaching or Bible teaching. It says fellowship, it says communion, and it says prayer. How do you think that we're doing right now in these four categories? Talk about our church. In fact, I'd like you to give us a score, and maybe your small group leaders will share those scores with me. I hope that they will. On a scale of 1 to 10, and 10 being perfect, Bo Derek perfect, how do you think that we're doing on teaching the Bible? How do you think that we're doing on fellowship? How do you think that we're doing on communion? How do you think that we're doing on prayer? Second, it says in verse 43 that they were, quote, filled with awe. Now that word awe, it's actually the word for fear. It means that fear was a part of the church. This is the same word that we get our English word phobia. So that gets me thinking, what do you think that they were afraid of? And was that fear appropriate? And then finally, and this is also something that I'd like to get feedback on, should the church today be a place that produces fear? It certainly has been talked about in the past. We think about churches that are hellfire and brimstone. And I don't think our church is that way, but what do you think? Should fear be a place? Does fear have an appropriate place in a worship service? Third, I think that it's important to note that it is the apostles who are doing the signs and wonders. These things are not being done by the 120-ish or the 3,120-ish. These miracles and these events came only from the apostles. So let's make sure that we make note of that. When I talked to you earlier about the events of speaking in tongues, I do think that that was all the 120. But these miraculous signs that are happening now, I don't think that it is. It says that it was the apostles. Well, the next thing that it describes the church is doing was caring for one another, which begs the question, how much do you think that the church today should care for its members? How much care should we give? What does that look like? What does it look like for time? What does it look like for finances? And is there a limit on how much care a church should give to its members? When do we reach that limit, if there is a limit? Well, finally, it says that the church enjoyed the favor of all the people. So here is my question. If our church acts this way, if it's built on these four foundations, if fear exists, if care exists, and we can certainly pray for miracles, and we do, will we also enjoy our community's favor? What do you think that it means to enjoy the favor of all the people of our community? Does that mean that we're the most popular church in town? What does it mean for a church today to have its community's favor? Well, every week I ask you to think about what you like, and I ask you to think about what you don't like, and well, what I like in this passage is that this is a growing church. A healthy church is a growing church. And it says that they were growing daily. I think that's beautiful. What I don't like? Honestly, I can't think of one thing in this passage that I don't like. I like it all, but I push the point because I always challenge you to think of what you don't like. So I guess, and this is really not fair, but It says that they got to enjoy the apostles' teaching. Amazing it would be to sit at Peter's feet, to listen to John talk about his best friend Jesus. We have their gospels, we have their letters, but we don't have them, and so I suppose that I wish that we did. Well, every week I remind you of the application that you made this weekend when you were listening to my message, and I challenged you to get involved in a small group, which if you're watching this video, you are involved in a small group, maybe for the first time because you have followed my challenge. So kudos to you. But here's my challenge for all of you groupers. Would you make it your responsibility this next week to invite one person to see that one new person attends group with you? Could we see that next week when we study Acts chapter 3, that our groups have doubled in size? Would all of you make the commitment that I'm going to find somebody in our church that I can bring to group next week? Well, I look forward to talking about Acts chapter 3 next week with you. Until then, God bless.